Yeah, I'm going to invite up to the stage now Melanie Calrk to speak about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who are living in remote areas and how they require substantial changes to ensure that they've got the access they need to neurological, clinical and social care. She's going to tell us about the Far North Huntington's mobile clinic as well. It's a community-led co-design intervention which is delivering neurological care on country. Would you please welcome to the stage Melanie Calrk.
Hi everyone. Just to say, if you do pop over to the West Coast, it's well worth asking if you can get a tour of Piara Waters because it's absolutely beautiful. I would like to start by acknowledging the country that this research has been conducted on, the Mirrawong country and Whadjuk Noongar land, and it's a privilege to be standing on Kaurna country today. And I welcome all mob who are present here in person and online. The image on the right was commissioned for our project. It's by a Broome-based artist, and it depicts the Huntington's journey, where a person learns that Huntington's is in the family, and they start quite a long journey of learning. You have to yarn with Western services, and then you take that yarning back to your community and have bigger yarns. Then you continue to learn about yourself as time goes on and how things change, and you come back in yarning again, because this is an evolving process and it's a long, lifelong process for the community. The introduction of Huntington's disease in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities has, so far, two very interesting stories. In far northwestern Australia, we've been told of the story of a camel trader who traded from Broome to Mount Isa from the 1950s to the 1970s. Across that path, he had up to 15 wives with whom he had multiple children. And it's said that he stole the wife of a powerful witch doctor who then cursed him, and that curse is placed onto unlucky kin. And so Huntington's disease in that remote area is called camel disease, and it is heavily stigmatised. It's bad luck, and it differs a lot to the people in far north Queensland. So we have a group we've been talking to in Townsville and Palm Island, and they told us the story that Huntington's was introduced to their community through the Kanaka slave trade in the 1800s, that as Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander and South Sea Islander peoples were traded and sold from Papua New Guinea to Townsville, colonisers introduced Huntington's disease. They don't call it camel disease, because they don't associate it with that at all, but it is associated with colonisation. And we have been mapping Huntington's in these regions, and we currently believe there are up to 1,000 people who are at risk of living with Huntington's across northern WA who are unknown to service providers. So we, as a country, have a massive project ahead of us, and it's a huge concern, not just for the Huntington's population, but everyone in Australia, because this is going to be an incredible cost to our society, both the cost in the loss of culture and the cost from an NDIS and service provision perspective. Working in research with Aboriginal communities is complex because the relationship with medical and Western services is complex, and research in particular. Aboriginal Australians have 60,000 plus years of science, and they are the original biological researchers, and they have their own scientific methods. With the introduction of colonisation, these methods were stripped from them and introduced medical research from a Western model into slavery camps and missions, where consent did not exist. So Aboriginal people consider research a dirty word. It's something that is associated with fear and with having their children taken away, and with the introduction of diseases that have absolutely destroyed their communities. I know the conference is about hope. I promise there's hope in here. So introducing research now, we're taking it very slow. We have a few research aims. Broadly, we're looking at how we can provide neuropsychiatric healthcare on country with these communities leading that healthcare so that they regain the power that they have lost over the last generations. We are building an understanding of how Mirrawong mob and other mob who we learn along the way talk about Huntington's and how they explore Huntington's and how it's part of their culture so that we can work within their understanding rather than placing our understanding upon them. In determining mob's understanding of Huntington's, we again empower them and we set ourselves as a person who can provide information and support, but they are the person with the experience. They live it, they are the ones who have the knowledge, and we take their guidance and go from there. From that, we're co-designing a model of care. And so that co-design model allows the community to hold the control of the research and tell us what they want, and then we work for them. And we're hoping to adapt that model across Northern Australia. So we've developed it in the East Kimberley, but that's one country. There are hundreds of countries who may be impacted here, and so we need to adapt the model for each country. But it creates a culturally safe methodology built on respect, reciprocity, and Indigenous ways of knowing and being. We only begin this process when we are welcomed into country. We do not just step onto country and offer services, because we will be turned away, and when you do that, you've then ruined another generation's opportunity at gaining care. We are introduced by trusted community members, and because of that, we are offered their social capital. So we work closely with local service providers to make sure that if they are trusted and they trust us, we can start the process of being trusted too. And in that way, it's community-led engagement. Food and culture are central. We hold barbecues where we do our outreach, and the image here that you see is of a barbecue that the matriarch invited us to hold at her home, and that was a huge moment of trust being shown. We take donations of goods. We are well aware that when we leave with extensive knowledge that we did not have before, and so we want to give something, and clinical service is not enough. These communities are living below the poverty line. So we go in with donations of clothes, shoes, sporting equipment, kitchenware, anything the community asks for, we try to get hold of. And we also provide a bit of support outside of our expertise. Yes, we're there for Huntington's disease, but all neuro is a concern in this community. These communities are being misdiagnosed with Parkinson's and MND, but they also experience very high rates of traumatic brain injury due to family and domestic violence, accidents in cars, and on the sporting fields. And so we're providing education around neuro generally as well. And in that way, we show that when we can lift all neuro, Huntington's will naturally lift too. Our research is done through largely qualitative methods, and our main method is through yarning, which is a preferred Indigenous method because it predates colonisation. It's a robust qualitative method and can be done one-on-one or in a group. And here you see a group yarn that was happening during a barbecue. And a lot of the time we don't actually yarn directly about Huntington's. Yarning is a circular conversation, and we talk around the conversation until a person from the community asks for a specific question. And then we'll talk about Huntington's because that's when they've shown they're ready. We also undertake some ethnography. So there'll be lots of diarising and reflecting while we're up there, and our clinical team will reflect on our own practice, and we reflect together, and then we take those reflections, and that becomes part of our research and our learning. And that all leads into an equity-centric iterative co-design model, where we work with our community to get their information. We come up with ideas and themes, and then we develop ideas of how we can adapt that model of care. We put them into place and we explore if they worked or not. And in that regard, the co-design is ongoing, and it grows as the community grows, and it progresses as the community's understanding of Huntington's progresses. And so the model of care will constantly evolve and adapt to treat the community that it is built for. And it can be immediately translatable. So for example, we were up on a visit and the matriarch referred to Huntington's as camel disease. And we said, do you want us to call it camel disease? She said yes. And our team instantly put that into place. And now we're in the Kimberley, we call it camel disease. We took that to Palm Island and they said, oh, we don't call it camel disease. And that's how we learned the Kanaka slave trade story. And what they've said is they don't like Huntington's because hunting is a huge part of their culture and they don't want it to have a negative connotation. They don't like the word disease, which a lot of our community don't like the word disease. And camel disease doesn't relate to them. So a huge aim moving forward is to actually build a word tailored to that community to describe Huntington's disease, to create an entirely new term. From a research perspective, we're working very early on. We're in the yarning stage and ascertaining social determinants of health and starting the co-design process. The step after will be to adapt that co-design model and set the foundation for future research. But in terms of research that is quantitative, based in handing out clinical measures and questionnaires, genetic counselling, they are not there. They are a long way away from there, and it will not be introduced until they feel that they're ready. So some outcomes. One of our main outcomes is that we have co-designed and educational videos.
We're going to talk about camel disease, also known as Huntington's disease. What is Huntington's disease? Huntington's can be passed in your blood through your DNA, from mother and or father to children and their children after that. Camel disease is nobody's fault, and you can't pass it on to other people, only to your children before they are born. But it's important to know the signs so countrymen can get the proper help. Camel disease causes damages to your brain over time, making it hard to move your arms and legs, think properly, or talk. Over time, people might find it hard to swallow, making it harder to eat or drink. Your family might even mistake you for being guardian, even when you're not. Think of them like rivers. Your brain sends messages to your body through the nervous system, just like water flowing in the rivers. When you have camel disease, these pathways get blocked, like when dams stop water from flowing. That's why it becomes hard to think and move properly. In the East Kimberley, our water systems are connected, just like people and places. When water doesn't flow and the land dries up, animals suffer and the environment changes. This is what happens in the brain with camel disease. People with Huntington's can start showing symptoms at any age. You might notice changes in your body or the way you think and feel. There is help and support for countrymen with Huntington's disease. If you or your family are worried about Huntington's disease, talk to your local AMS or Aboriginal health worker. If you want to know if you have this gene, you can go through a special type of counselling called predictive testing. The counsellors will yarn and support you and your family as you decide if you want to learn about how Huntington's is passed in your blood. You are not alone. Help is available. Reach out to these local services for support and information.
So the co-designed... Thank you, they absolutely deserve that. The co-design elements that you'll see in that video are one, that it's a cartoon, so the community do not have to worry about potentially seeing images or voices of people who may have passed. It uses metaphor, where it relates to a river that's drying up, and that's because the East Kimberley is built around the Ord Valley River, and so the Ord River is part of their culture. It uses Aboriginal English, which is the main language in the community, and the word gurrigan represents drunk, because that's how people talk about being drunk. And we took that into Palm Island and they liked it overall. Of course, they didn't particularly want the use of camel disease, and so one day when we adapt it for them, we will use the term that we co-designed together. They also would have preferred that the river be a reef, because for them, high tide and low tide of a reef is much more culturally significant. We've also got a vignette, and this is not necessarily so necessary for an Australian audience, but our international audiences do not understand the challenges that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples face. And so in this vignette, it's a pretty good example of what a person in the East Kimberley is living with. She's a woman aged 32, and she was diagnosed with manifest Huntington's disease. She was willing to give a blood sample and her CAG repeats are 48, In that community, we are seeing around 50, but most people aren't willing to have that done or go through predictive testing. She's likely been manifest for over 5 years and she has not sought support because it was not the main concern for her up until then. And when she did seek support, she got support from her mother's support worker. And this is because that was a trusted person in her community who knew how to get her the help that she needed. She's living in a 3-bedroom house that's incredibly overcrowded and she's sleeping on a swag on the floor. She's not getting very good sleep because of the overcrowding. There are issues with infectious disease and she's regularly falling over and bumping her head when she gets up in the morning, so there's concern for TBI as well. Her literacy levels are low, and so building health literacy with low standard literacy is difficult, but also she can't complete forms for herself, and there is no social worker in the entire region, not just in her town, but actually throughout the Kimberley. And she has 3 children at risk of Huntington's and some grandchildren as well. There's a history of alcohol abuse and substance exposure in utero, which we know will impact the progression of Huntington's. And she has experienced trauma, lives with diabetes, she has loose teeth, so we're concerned about her swallow capacity as time goes on. She has a few requests. She wants all care provided on country. Telehealth does not work for her, it's not culturally safe, she doesn't get anything out of it, and actually quite often there isn't the infrastructure to support it anyway. She has a wish to die on country and would prefer not to receive care if she cannot stay on country. It is her choice to stay on country for life. She wants safe and secure housing, but the community doesn't actually have disability accessible housing. In Halls Creek there is one disability accessible house. And she wants improved sleep, and she wants the matriarch to attend all appointments. And this is really, really important in this community. It's quite common that you'll have the whole community involved in one health decision, and so there we have concerns for predictive testing and genetic counselling as well. The impact is not just for the person getting the result, it never is, but it's for an entire community. And our big concern is how do we manage this from 3,000 kilometres away? It takes longer to fly to Kununurra from Perth than it takes to fly here to Adelaide. WA is a huge state, and we have very remote communities living with Huntington's disease. So when we look at these concerns, we consider the social determinants of health, and there are a lot impacting this community. At a micro or individual level, the big one is the fact that Huntington's is in the future, mob live in the now. There are so many factors impacting people's lives that they are in survival mode, they are not thriving. And so Huntington's becomes a concern when it starts to negatively impact their life. Up until then, they don't have capacity for it because they've got so many other things to focus on. So how do we introduce early intervention or prevention? Or how do we have discussions about that when the community are just trying to make it through the day? At a meso level, which is the environmental level, actually the environment is not conducive to providing care. We can only travel during the dry for risk that we get flooded in. So there are 6 months of the year where the community often doesn't receive any service unless they are with an NDIS provider in their town. And at a government level, our funding is tentative, and that's the best way I can say that. I think what we can see here is that this community is some of the most disadvantaged people within Australia. We are looking at people who are living below the poverty line, they have very low literacy, they are Indigenous, and they have ongoing impacts of colonisation and intergenerational trauma. Combine that with intergenerational trauma from Huntington's, and their trauma load is excessively high. And as the Senator said this morning, they're 40 years behind the rest of the world in their Huntington's care. We cannot make that up overnight. We have an incredible load of work ahead of us as a nation, and I include all of you in that. Because we can't do this quickly, we have to be working together so that we can slow and steady get this community up to the same place that the rest of our community are living at. We've been looking at mapping. In just a couple of years, we've identified at least 30 communities that are affected by or at risk of having Huntingtons in the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander communities. The communities in green are known, communities in orange are suspected, and there's one community in red, and that is because it is named after a well-known family, but we've not had any communication with that group. Literally every other month we find out about a new community that has someone living with Huntington's, and it's just based on self-report. So we have a number of barriers, as I've said, the fear of Western services, insecure funding, but we have great facilitators too. And they are really, it comes down to the communities themselves. They are so connected, they really want to get service and they want to be supporting each other. They have local service providers who are dedicated to looking after their community and who are dedicated to upskilling. And I'm really lucky to say that our specialist service providers are dedicated to upskilling as well. It's a privilege to get to work with Neurosciences Unit and Huntington's Australia. So our next step, led by Huntington's Australia and supported by the Neurosciences Unit, and I hope a lot of people in this room, we're hoping to develop the Northern Shelf Neuro Network. There's a QR code there. I would love for everyone in this room and online to go to that QR code. There's like a 1-minute survey where I ask you, what would you do? How would you help these communities? How can we maintain the engagement? We want to expand these clinics across Australia to identify and engage at-risk individuals, and we want to do it through all neuro. We want to use Huntington's as a way to get into the community, but educate clinicians and communities on neuro in general. In doing so, lifting Huntington's along the way. Huntington's is often the scariest conversation for these communities. Something like traumatic brain injury, which our cultural liaison officer talks about, is much easier to engage with because it's common and they have an understanding of what it is. If we can work together as a neurological network, we can educate these communities about neuro, they'll recognise Huntington's and hopefully they'll seek support earlier. A huge question that we had while we were on country was from graduates. A lot of the allied health providers are graduates straight out of undergrad, and they are saying that they do not have supervision. So we would like part of the Neuro Network to be an opportunity for supervision to be provided by specialists. So please share your ideas with us. We're very interested. Thank you for your time. Thank you to everyone who supports this project. It's massive and we cannot do it alone. Are there any questions? Oh, silence. Hope. Okay, so I think this is hopeful, and I think it's hopeful because these communities want change and the local service providers are so dedicated to getting that for them. There's a lot that can be done here, and it can be done in small steps. It doesn't have to be big and all at once. It can be slow and steady, and we can do it together. And so I think there's an opportunity for the Huntington's community to really stand up and look after our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander friends.
Well done, Melanie. That's been a really engaging conversation, so thank you so much for your presentation. I've got a question. Is there a way that we can follow your journey? I know it's obviously quite difficult to post stuff on socials, but do you share updates, or even people who just want to follow along and they maybe can't just provide the answers in the QR code but all want to help out? How can we follow your journey?
Yeah, so we are planning for a newsletter to come out as the Northern Shelf Neuro Network takes off, and so we'd love everyone to be part of that. But you're right, it is really hard to share updates about this because a lot of it has to remain confidential and we can't risk identifying communities who are not willing to share yet. I'm also on ResearchGate, so you can find information on there.
Beautiful, because you are with Edith Cowan University, so...
Edith Cowan University,
yep.
North Metro and Parent Institute. Got them all in there.
Very good, well done. Someone there is ticking a box there, so thank you so much. Is there anything else that you, I guess as a parting question, anything else that you wish people knew about your work that you've been doing on country?
Mm-hmm. It's a privilege. These communities are so beautiful and they welcome us and they invite us into their homes, and it's just, we are so lucky. Maybe Monica can talk.
I couldn't say it better myself, Mel. I'm just wondering, as a wider national community, is there anything we can do to raise the profile of this and let our local MPs know that this is really important to us as a Huntington's national community?
Absolutely. Reach out to your MPs. Tell them that we need chronic condition funding, we need federal funding, and we need it to be ongoing because we cannot do this work on the smell of an oily rag, which at the moment we've moved from the Cook government funding to donations to Huntington's Australia. So we need secure funding now. So please reach out to all of your MPs.
Thank you so much, Melanie, and thank you for sharing the stories today.